The first explosion ripped through the shattered remains of New Paris, turning the city's skeleton into a firestorm of collapsing steel and concrete. Blade barely registered the shockwave as he rolled behind a crumbling barricade, plasma, katana humming at his side. His visor flickered with damage reports, vital signs unstable, armor integrity at 20%, ammunition low. None of it mattered. Not now. Not when the Scifi had come to finish humanity for good. A second blast roared from the east, shaking the ground with enough force to send debris skidding over the corpses of fallen soldiers. The enemy was closing in, their towering biomechanical forms cutting through the ruins like gods of war. Blade's earpiece crackled to life. "Blade, you still breathing?" The voice belonged to Vok, old, grizzled, and stubborn as hell. "Depends on your definition," Blade muttered, peering over his cover. 3 Scifi warriors stalked through the smoke, their elongated limbs bristling with living weapons. "Good. Then get your ass to the command post. We're not dead yet." Blade exhaled, tightening his grip on the katana. "On my way." He launched forward, feet pounding against broken pavement, closing the distance before the Scifi could react. The first turned just in time to see the plasma edge of his blade carve a searing arc through its throat. The second raised its weapon, a grotesque fusion of metal and flesh, but Blade was faster, twisting, driving the katana straight into its chest. The third recoiled, chittering in alarm, only to be obliterated by a thunderous explosion from above. Blade didn't flinch as a hulking figure landed beside him, dust and alien blood coating his battle-worn armor. "You were taking too long," Axe rumbled, hoisting his grenade launcher over one massive shoulder. "You ruined my dramatic entrance," Blade shot back. Axe smirked. "Didn't hear you complaining when I saved your ass." Another detonation rocked the battlefield, and Blade turned toward the command post, a hastily fortified underground bunker beneath what used to be a museum. They sprinted toward the entrance, slipping through the steel-reinforced doors just as another wave of plasma fire erupted behind them. Inside, the war room was a flurry of activity. Holographic displays projected a grim reality. Human forces were being overwhelmed across every front. Vok stood at the center, face lined with exhaustion, but eyes burning with determination. Beside him, Iris worked furiously at a console, fingers flying over the interface. "Nice of you to finally show up," she said without looking up. "Was starting to think you got vaporized." "Not yet," Blade replied. "What's the situation?" Vok gestured to the central display. "Bad. The Scifi brought their entire armada. We hold this ground, or we're extinct." Blade studied the projections. The enemy was relentless, pressing inward with surgical precision. "We need a game-changer." Vok's lips pressed into a thin line. "We have one. The Helios Protocol." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Helios was their last resort, a doomsday weapon designed to overload the planet's ionosphere, creating a global electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to fry the Scifi's technology. The cost? Earth's own infrastructure would be obliterated in the process. Iris sighed. "It's a one-way ticket back to the Stone Age. If we set it off, we'll win, but we'll have nothing left." "Better than extinction," Vok said. Axe crossed his arms. "We setting it up or debating philosophy?" Before anyone could answer, alarms blared. A new signal appeared on the holographic display. Massive, moving fast, and heading straight for them. Vok's expression darkened. "The Warlord." Silence fell over the room. The Scifi Warlord was more than just a commander. He was a force of nature, a living nightmare that had torn through entire battalions without slowing down. Blade exhaled. "We need to get to the launch site now." Vok nodded. "Agreed." "Iris, upload the activation codes." "Axe, grab whatever firepower you can carry. We're making our last stand." Outside, the battlefield was chaos. The sky burned crimson as the Scifi's warships rained destruction upon the city. Blade's team moved quickly, weaving through the ruins as enemy forces closed in. A dropship waited near the shattered remains of an old cathedral, engines already primed. As they sprinted toward it, a deafening roar filled the air. The ground trembled. Then, through the smoke and fire, he appeared. The warlord, towering over his soldiers, clad in obsidian armor that pulsed with an eerie, bioluminescent glow, he strode forward like death incarnate. His jagged spear, forged from the bones of conquered species, crackled with energy. Axe exhaled. Oh, great. He brought his fancy stick. Blade ignored him. There was no time for jokes. No time for fear. The warlord lifted a clawed hand, and the battlefield fell silent, as if the world itself held its breath. Then he pointed at Blade. A challenge. Blade clenched his jaw, stepping forward, plasma katana igniting in his grip. Get to the dropship, he said without looking back. Vok's voice was grim. We don't leave people behind. You won't, Blade said. Just buy me a few minutes. Axe swore under his breath. This is a bad idea. Just go, Blade said. They hesitated, then moved. The dropship's engines roared to life as Blade and the warlord advanced toward each other. The world around them blurred. There was only the fight. The warlord struck first, spear lashing out like lightning. Blade twisted, narrowly avoiding the fatal blow. He countered, slashing upward, but the warlord parried effortlessly, the impact sending shockwaves through the ground. Faster, stronger, relentless. Blade knew he couldn't win, not alone. But he didn't have to. He just needed to last long enough. A voice crackled in his earpiece. Blade, we're airborne. 5 seconds to evac. He gritted his teeth. One last move. One last gamble. The warlord lunged, spear thrusting forward. Blade didn't dodge. He surged forward instead, letting the weapon pierce through his side, but not before driving his katana straight into the warlord's chest. Pain exploded through his body. The warlord snarled, black ichor spilling from the wound. But Blade had no intention of dying just yet. He tore the katana free, kicked off the warlord's chest, and activated his suit's emergency boosters. He shot through the air, just as the dropship banked overhead. A metal hand reached down, axe, cursing as he hauled Blade aboard. The last thing Blade saw before the door slammed shut was the warlord, still standing, still alive, but wounded. It wasn't over. Not yet. Blood dripped from Blade's side, pooling beneath him on the cold metal floor of the dropship. He pressed a gloved hand to the wound, feeling the heat of his own plasma-burned flesh. Every breath sent a fresh wave of agony through his ribs, but pain meant he was still alive. For now, the ship rocked violently, dodging enemy fire as it cut through the ruined skyline. We need a medic over here. Vok's voice was sharp, cutting through the chaos. Iris was already kneeling beside Blade, pressing a field injector to his wound. This is going to hurt. Blade let out a sharp breath as the serum surged into his system, sending a freezing burn through his veins. His vision blurred, his body locking up for a second before the pain dulled to a manageable level. Axe leaned against the ship's bulkhead, reloading his grenade launcher. You realize you got stabbed by a 10-foot alien and survived, right? You officially win dumbest bastard alive. Blade exhaled, forcing himself upright. Not my dumbest moment. Dumbest recent moment, then. The ship jolted as it descended toward their destination, an abandoned orbital defense station built into the jagged cliffs outside the city. What was left of humanity's command structure had been forced underground, hidden beneath layers of rock and steel. As the doors hissed open, the team disembarked into the tunnels, their boots echoing against the reinforced flooring. The corridor led them deep into the complex, where dozens of engineers and soldiers worked tirelessly around a central device, the Helios Protocol. A towering construct of interwoven energy coils and pulse generators, the Helios was a masterpiece of destructive brilliance. Once activated, it would send an electromagnetic storm rippling across the planet, disabling every piece of Sci Fi technology in existence. And every piece of human technology, too. Vok approached the main terminal, his expression grim. We're running out of time. The Sci Fi are closing in. Iris was already plugging into the system, her fingers a blur over the console. The uplink's intact, but we need direct access to the mothership to transmit the ignition sequence. Blade frowned. You're saying we have to go inside the mothership? Unless you've got a better idea. Axe let out a low whistle, sneaking onto a ship full of murder-happy aliens. Great. Exactly how I wanted to spend my final hours. Vok turned to the team, his expression unreadable. We have one shot at this. We plant the beacon, transmit the sequence, and get out. No one spoke. They all knew the unspoken truth. There was no getting out. Not for all of them. Blade nodded. Then let's move. The stolen Scifi transport hummed beneath their feet, its organic interior pulsating with a sickly blue glow. The ship smelled like damp earth and burnt metal, and every surface felt unnervingly alive, shifting under their touch. Axe wrinkled his nose. I take back everything bad I've ever said about human tech. I miss seats that don't feel like they're breathing. Iris ignored him, focused on her wrist console as she hacked into the ship's systems. We'll be in range of the mothership in 5 minutes. No way we get past their scanners, so we're going fast and crashing hard. Blade adjusted his grip on his katana. His wounds were stiff, but he forced himself to push past it. Pain was secondary. The mission was everything. As they neared the massive Scifi flagship, the scale of it became clear. The mothership loomed in the void, its surface shifting like liquid metal, forming and reforming in an unsettling, organic rhythm. Entire cities could have fit inside its vast hull. Their stolen craft shuddered as Iris forced an override into the docking protocols. We got about 30 seconds before they realized we're not one of theirs. The ship lurched as it was pulled into the docking bay. The moment the doors hissed open, the team moved. The interior of the mothership was worse than the transport. Twisting corridors of chitin and steel, pulsating with an unnatural rhythm. Scifi warriors patrolled the halls, their bodies armored with living plating. Blade signaled for silence, leading the way as they slipped into the shadows. Every step felt like walking into the lungs of a beast, the air thick and humid. They navigated through the winding corridors, each turn bringing them closer to the ship's core. Axe muttered under his breath, I swear this place is watching us. Not wrong, Iris replied. The ship's biosensors are active. If we stay still too long, we're dead. They reached the central chamber, a towering cathedral of shifting energy conduits and floating control nodes. At the center, suspended in a web of crackling energy, was the core relay. That's our target, Vox said. Iris moved first, sprinting toward the terminal. She plugged in, bypassing the alien firewalls with practiced precision. Almost there, a deep, guttural growl echoed through the chamber. Blade turned, every muscle tensing. The warlord stepped forward from the shadows. His armor had been reforged, darker and more menacing than before. His wounds had healed. His spear glowed with barely contained energy, the tip dripping with a burning, violet plasma. Axe cursed. Oh, come on. Vok raised his rifle. We hold him off. Iris finished the job. The warlord moved faster than should have been possible, covering the distance in a single bound. Vok fired first, but the warlord swatted the bullets aside like dust. Then he was among them. Axe met him head-on, unleashing a barrage of explosives. The room shook, fire consuming the warlord's form, only for him to emerge unscathed, striking Axe with enough force to send him crashing into the far wall. Blade stepped forward, katana raised. The warlord tilted his head, then smiled. A silent acknowledgement. This time, there were no words, no challenges, only war. Blade struck first, a blur of motion and energy. The warlord met him blow for blow, the impact of their weapons sending shockwaves through the chamber. In the chaos, Iris kept working, sweat beading on her forehead. Almost there, Blade fought harder than he ever had, but the warlord was stronger, faster. He could feel himself slowing, his wounds catching up to him. The warlord knocked him back, raising his spear for the final strike. Axe roared, lunging forward, tackling the warlord with enough force to drive him into the core's energy field. The room exploded with light. The warlord staggered, the energy coursing through him, but he wasn't dead. Blade didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, driving his katana through the warlord's chest, pinning him into the core. The room erupted with a deafening pulse. Iris screamed, beacon planted, transmitting now. A countdown appeared on her console. 10 seconds. Blade turned to the team. Get out of here. Vok hesitated. We don't. Go. Axe grabbed Iris, dragging her toward the exit. Vok gave Blade one last look, then followed. The countdown hit 0. The ship began to explode. Blade turned back to the warlord, still impaled, still alive. The warlord exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. You die with me. Blade nodded. The flames consumed them both. The sky over Earth burned with the last remnants of the Helios Protocol. A storm of electromagnetic fury had swept across the planet, tearing through Zypher technology, frying circuits, and bringing their warships crashing down like dying stars. The battle was over. The enemy was broken. And yet, the victory felt hollow. Vok stood on the ruined cliffs outside the command station, watching the wreckage of the Zypher mothership burn in the distance. Its massive form had been split apart, chunks of its biomechanical hull scattered across the landscape like the bones of a fallen god. The final explosion had been visible from orbit, a beacon of defiance and sacrifice. Beside him, Iris clutched a small data tablet, her face pale, streaked with dirt and dried blood. That was his last transmission, she murmured. Her voice was hoarse, hollow. Blade sent it just before the detonation. Vok hesitated before taking the device. The screen flickered, static crackling before the image stabilized. Blade appeared, battered but standing tall. His visor was cracked, and blood darkened the fabric beneath his armor. But his eyes, those sharp, unyielding eyes, remained steady. If you're seeing this, Blade said, his voice rough but unwavering, then it means we did it. The Zypher are finished. The war is over. You won. He exhaled, a brief pause before he continued. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. But humanity never stops fighting. And if there's one thing I know, it's that we don't just survive, we endure. We rebuild. He glanced past the camera, as if looking at something beyond the reach of the transmission. I won't be coming back. You already knew that. But that's how this always ends, isn't it? His expression softened. Take care of each other. And make it count. The screen went dark. Iris closed her eyes, gripping the tablet so tightly her knuckles turned white. Axe, standing nearby, said nothing. He didn't need to. His massive frame was rigid, his jaw clenched, his usual sarcasm absent. A cold wind swept through the ruins, carrying the acrid scent of fire and death. Across the remains of the city, survivors emerged from shelters, their faces filled with the quiet disbelief of those who had lived through the end of the world. Some wept, some simply stood in silence, staring at the wreckage of what had once been an empire built to annihilate them. Humanity had won, but the cost was steep. Days passed, then weeks. The rebuilding began, slow and painful. What remained of the planetary infrastructure was in shambles. Communications were erratic, power grids unstable. Cities had been reduced to skeletons of their former selves, and the skies were still streaked with the remains of Zypher warships that had fallen like meteors. Yet there was hope. Survivors gathered in makeshift camps, pooling resources, forming new alliances. Engineers worked to restore whatever technology they could salvage. Scientists scoured the remnants of Zypher wreckage, searching for anything that could be repurposed for humanity's future. And through it all, Blade's name was spoken in hushed reverence. Stories spread like wildfire of his final battle, his defiance against the warlord, his sacrifice to ensure their survival. Some called him a legend, others a martyr. In the heart of what was once New Paris, a monument was raised. A single, towering pillar of reinforced steel, salvaged from the ruins, engraved with the names of those who had given their lives in the final battle. At its base, a simple inscription. We endure. Axe stood before it one evening, staring at the words. The sunset cast long shadows over the desolate streets, bathing the ruins in gold and crimson. Iris approached, stopping a few feet away. You ever wonder if he knew? She asked quietly. Axe didn't look away from the monument. Knew what? That we'd keep going. That we'd find a way. Axe let out a slow breath. Blade always knew. He finally turned to face her. That's why he stayed behind. Iris nodded, swallowing hard. It still doesn't feel real. It never does. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not unwelcome. The war was over. The world had changed. And yet, in the quiet aftermath, there was something else, something that had been missing for so long. Possibility. Far beyond the horizon, past the wreckage and the ruins, past the scars left by war, the future waited. It would be difficult. It would take years, maybe decades. But humanity had survived. Blade had been right. They endured.